What's up, everybody? Back again for another late night video. Working on this 150-gallon tank here. Going to be doing some maintenance and talking about some of the stuff with the plants going on in here. One of the plants we'll be talking about today is the Ammonia crassicalis. Probably saying that wrong, but you know how it is. You kind of read it a million times, but you never really say it out loud. It's a fairly rare ammonia that it's once again is pretty easy to find in Africa. It's pretty easy to find in Europe from time to time, but you're not going to find it very often in the United States. I was lucky enough to find a little sample of it to start growing it out and kind of show you guys how to take care of it. Just got done doing water tests, you know, so I can make sure to let you guys know what is going on in this exact aquarium right here, to let you know some of the stuff that's happening. We got the Fluval 3.0. Of course, we got CO2, 30 to 50 parts per million, depending on the day and sometimes the gas level, but let's call it 30 parts per million with the CO2. I'm using Easy Green, which actually I can see the bottle up there in the monitor. I'm using Easy Green as a fertilizer. pH is sitting at right about 6.6 right now. I've kind of got it slammed down because my KH is rising, so I'm kind of battling back to keep that down. But the KH is rising for a good reason, and that reason is the guppies in here are doing quite well. So a bunch of them have actually ended up down in the sump, going on a little sump adventure down there, which is just reality. Sometimes they end up down there, so I'm gonna have to be netting them out tomorrow. But for now, they're doing fine. But my KH is rising quite a bit, and that's because of all the calcium I'm adding in the sump to keep the guppies from just wasting away in my super soft water. GH is sitting at right about 3, so I'm gonna have to do a water change tomorrow and kind of get those numbers back to normal. But that's what's happening right now, and everything is going fine with pretty much every plant in here. I've got a ton of different plants. Things are going pretty well, and we'll talk about the rest of them as the video goes along. But I did want to note on this ammonia right at the beginning, because people are assuredly going to ask about it, because it's right front and center and just blocking the view of some other plants and stuff. So I wanted to let you guys know what was going on with that. I am propagating it so that I can start moving it to other tanks. The tank that I have for it right now it's not ready yet, but it's almost ready. Basically breaking in that tank, getting it ready for plants and stuff. And, you know, I'm also filming all the little parts and things going on with it, so you guys will be able to check that out. But the 150 is coming along. Everything is doing great. We're going to be dealing with some different plants. The Rotella Hurrah, as always, needs trimming. The Pogostemon needs trimming. You know, we've got Ludwigia that's up at the top. We got stuff going on, so we're gonna have to trim a lot of stuff. So don't get super bored, but lock yourself in. We're gonna be here for a little while, getting all the trimming done, and hopefully I can narrate it enough for you that you don't fall completely asleep. To asleep? I don't know. Let's get in there. Get in there! I have to admit a fault here. I really kind of screwed up with this Rotella, because I should have been shaping this bush lower. I should have been shaping this much lower. As you can see, I've got the splits right down here where it's splitting, and you know, I honestly don't think that I shaped it low enough, but I just don't have the moxie right now to just completely cut this back, mainly just because of my own arrogance, I guess. I just don't want to yet, but we still are going to have to trim pretty heavily back on this. It's getting a little out of hand. You guys will notice that I don't turn off my tank when I do my trimming. It's also one of the upsides of having a sump that I think a lot of people don't mention very often, is that I have a large overflow, which isn't going to get clogged up with little trimmings little cuttings and stuff like that. Look, if I cut a leaf in half and then there's a leaf floating around, it'll work its way up into the overflow and right down into the sump, get caught down there, and it's way easy to clean out. So I do not miss the days of having hang-on backs and stuff like that that'll get clogged up and you wouldn't even get anything off of the surface and stuff. So people always wonder, like, what's that crazy gurgling noise in the background? That is actually my arm. When I put my arm into the tank, it displaces water. It sends it into the overflow, which sends it rushing down the emergency drain, which is not set up as a siphon, so it makes that gurgling noise. People ask about that quite a bit, and I feel like I don't answer that question, so I figured I'd mention it while I'm doing this, because this is just a matter of, you know, trimming this back. I am trying to be cognizant to not cut off trimmings like this, where it's split. I'm trying to cut above that, but some of it's just too high up. So I'm trying to work my way down lower, but you can see I'm getting all these nice little shoots that are down lower down here to kind of bush out, which is good. I am having to kind of cut this lower than I anticipated, but I think just doing it is making me a little more courageous to cut this back and just deal with it being ugly looking for a little bit. So oftentimes the act of doing is just enough to send you down the right path, you know? Because I think in reality, like, if this was a customer's tank, and I would be like, yeah, we've just got to cut that back and it's just got to be funky looking for a little while. So I do have to remember, like, to treat my tanks like it was a customer's tank more often than I do. Although I don't currently do any customers' tanks. I basically do my own tank. I'm kind of developing weird little habits of, like, letting plants outgrow what I want it to look like. Just because it's awesome, like, being able to check out plants that are, like, way growing up. But I do know that it will be a big time maintenance issue down the road, so I should remember to follow my own advice a little more often, right? But we all do that, and it's not a detrimental thing. I'm not hurting anybody, so. I'm just going through here. I'm kind of cognizant of my trimming. There we go. I'm clearing it out. You guys can actually start to see some of the species that are behind here. It's like one of my favorite plants of all time is hanging out behind this plant, and it's just not getting its respect that it deserves, like being one of my favorites. I wish it was a plant that I could put front and center, but it just I've never been able. So the plant that I'm talking about is this Crypt the Lancia, which is back here. I've never been able to have it be a forefront or even just a focus plant. I've never been able to pull it off and have it look good. You know, it's just a plant that should be accenting and behind. You know, it's like the rhythm section, you know what I mean? Like, everybody likes a drum and bass solo now and again, but if you just had nothing but drum and bass solos, you'd get tired of it, right? Crypt the Lancia is like that. It's just a great support plant. Really accents really well. See how it just kind of pops out back here, doing cool stuff. And that Crypt Oosteriana is back there too, just hiding out, being subtle, subtle and subdued. Let's see what we got here. We got like a multi-stem here, which is gonna suck when I cut this off, but gotta do it. All right, so I'm kind of doing the opposite of what I said I was gonna do at the beginning, and I'm actually cutting this back to where it should be, so I take that back at the beginning. You know, this is also one of the problems with Rotella, is that it will completely grow out and down along the bottom like that. I mean, problem, or you know, for some people it's they're like, oh, it's awesome, but I do know that like long term, everything that's a runner along the ground like that is eventually will just fill up the whole tank. You know, I mean, if you just left it long enough, eventually the Rotella Atra would just take over the whole, it would just take over the whole tank. All right, so I think we got that sufficiently trimmed back. I feel like I left that one. Yeah, I'll have to keep trimming this thing back and really shape it into a bush that's gonna have to just be a rounded bush. I didn't want it to be a rounded bush, but I think that's ultimately what it's gonna have to be. Now I'm gonna do this plant later. I'm not actually gonna do, this is the same plant, but I'm not gonna trim this right now just because of time constraints. I can always just come back and hack this back when I'm not narrating, you know, what I'm doing. But it's always good to kind of check and make sure you don't have any little hair algae or anything like that. But you can also see like the aerial roots are really starting to kick in, and that's always a good sign, the Rotella, that it's time to trim it back. Everything down low is going to just end up funky looking, you know. All right, we got ourselves a pile of greenery here. Hopefully pass that on to somebody who wants it. All right. So our next little deal that we got to do here is, what am I doing next? I forget. Okay, so the Pogostemon erectus, we're gonna have to trim a couple of those back real quick, which is not that big of a deal. And I think I've done enough tutorial stuff explaining what I'm doing with this. But we're gonna pull this one. And there was one more I saw that I wanted to trim back. Let's see if I can. Oh yeah, it's going to be this one right here. That's starting to really cover that whole area. And it's starting to shade out the stuff below and behind it. And this is growing in good, because when it comes time to trim some of these other ones back, it's going to work out pretty good. I think for right now, that's pretty solid. This one right here is going to outgrow the rest of them. So we'll pull that one out. How does that look? A reasonable little haircut there. Lop a couple of them back. You can see how close everything is. Everything's getting up to the top. Everything's getting close up to the top up here, which means I'm gonna have to come in and do some pretty aggressive trimming here fairly soon. I think for right now, go ahead and gonna trim this one too. Of course, it's always, I'm like, yeah, this will just take 30 seconds, no big deal. 5 minutes later, I'm still poking around at it. Okay, so we got that one done. The erectus is kind of thinned out. I'll keep that going. I think next week I'll probably trim this. And that'll be good. The Alternanthera renekii is growing out through the top of the tank again, which means it's going to be a time for a trim on that one. Which alternate there, I almost always pull the stem out, trim it and replant it, and stick the stems in a sump. So I'll do that with this one because it's growing out through the top. Got some dead leaves down here. Trim that one, this one down short there. And replant this little buddy. We'll see. That will work. We've got a pogostemon root here that is just ugly looking. Let's pull that out. Alright. So that looks pretty good for right now. Alright. This rotella is probably gonna bother me, but whatever. Alright. A couple little clumps of hair algae down here growing on the too much light collecting. There's probably a little bit of maybe not eating food or something that's kind of collected down here. Not a lot of flow in this area right down here at the front, surprisingly enough. So kind of typical to see a couple little clumps of hair algae collecting back here where there's just nothing clearing out. You know, you could get like a little bit of flow, could clear out a lot of that. I could come down and vacuum the substrate, but I am not doing that tonight. I don't want to get out the hose and stuff. I'm just not into it right now. So we'll just clear out a couple of these little bits of hair algae. Honestly, it's the easiest way. I find it to be the easiest way because getting out the hose, vacuuming, all that kind of stuff is going to be a pain. So you see this wacky root right here? That is from the Rotella rhamnosaur, which we actually, I think it was last week, maybe the week before. We'll put that one right. Oh, come on, camera. We'll put that one right down here. We'll put those plant weights on it, and we're getting a couple little sprouts from it, but we'll focus on that a little bit next week. Because it's once, you know, next week it'll be sprouted more. Since I laid it flat like that, it's started sending out sprouts, and then I'll show you how to trim and plant those. That's an exceedingly expensive plant at this juncture in time, so we should you know, help you guys if you were to order it and you wanted to propagate it. Help pass on some of that propagation to you all. Gotta get some of this Pogostemon stellatus, as always. Pretty much like always trimming Pogostemon stellatus, right? It's like the story of my life. The story of my life in form of Pogostemon stellatus. Very excited, very wow. Alright. So let's talk about this Ammonia a little bit. That is right here. So this is kind of a rare plant in the fact that there just isn't that much of it in the US. And one of the big reasons for that is that this is a plant that for sure needs good specific light. It needs CO2. And if you don't have those things, it just ain't gonna grow. It's not gonna work out for you. Now, as you can see here, what I've done is I've plopped the portion that I got with plant weights. I didn't even plant it into the substrate. It probably has rooted into the substrate and allowed it to grow, adapt to this water condition. And these aerial roots are starting to show up here, right? Up by the top of the plant. And the reason for that is getting nutrients from all the way down at the bottom, way down there, is way too much work for this plant. It's way too much work for pretty much any stem plant that you're going to see out there. Aerial roots show up because it's trying to root so that it can get nutrients from here to here as opposed to all the way down there and bring nutrients all the way up to the top to continue growing. Now, as a aquascaper or a plant keeper or whatever you want to call yourself, why this is important, this gives you a great visual of when to trim the tops off of the plant and replant them. So this is what you would replant, this top part. This bottom part here, you want to resprout from that. So let me pull this up a little bit. It is rooted directly into the substrate. So let me move the camera a little bit. There we go. So you can see right down here, it's sending out new sprouts down at the bottom, sending out all new shoots down from the bottom. Now it's also the same thing. So the roots down there are collecting nutrients, and it realizes that it doesn't need to send it all the way up to the top, so it starts sending out those side shoots. Those side shoots will become independent plants, and I'll propagate it, and I'll plant them in an aquarium. So this is all just propagation tactics of getting in a rare plant and then propagating it. And as always, I'm short on plant weights, so I just trimmed this plant, and now I don't have a plant weight for it. Just guess I'm just short on plant weights again. Thought I had some. But I was wrong. Okay, so unfortunately I'm gonna have to just let this float. Well, maybe I'll just plant it in here, even though it's not gonna stay in this tank. I can go ahead and just find it a temporary spot. I'll probably fall in love with it being there. So, show you guys. Plant it right there. Why not? Just let it live right there for a little while. Okay. Now, Ludwigia back here is doing the exact same thing that Ammonia is doing. Once it's gotten up to the top, all the way up to the top of this tank, 24-inch tall tank, you can see it started sending out aerial roots up here by the top of the tank. Now this is what we're going to trim off and replant, and we're actually going to even just trim the whole stalk all the way back down to there, because it has some side shoots back there, and so that's where we're going to trim it. We're going to trim it back here where the little side shoots are. We'll pull that off, and there we go. So we got that out. Let's see how many other ones are doing the same thing back here. And one more back there. Okay. Now we got all of our Ludwigia trimmed, which is great. And I'm just gonna, I wonder if I can get this on camera for you. Well, so I'm gonna take all of this part and do the same thing. We're gonna trim off this middle part. We're gonna use that to propagate. So we're gonna resprout from that. And then all these little tops here, we're just gonna replant them. So we just have 3, and you know, typically with Ludwigia, I would plant every single stem individually, which I pretty much recommend people to do with everything. But I'm really getting tight on real estate back here, So I'm actually just gonna plant all 3 of them at the same time. As I was looking and I realized I do have a spot that they would fit, but I'm gonna have to just go in once like that. So a little bit harebrained. Sometimes you gotta be a little, I mean, it's not accurate to say I was being wild, but sometimes you just gotta go for it, you know. And we also have some Rotella Atra back here that has grown way up to the top. So we're actually gonna have to trim this stuff back also. Put that over there. It's hard to get in here with the camera in the way. The camera is like an added bonus. It makes it a little more exciting, right? Somebody asked me how much do I do not on camera, and actually I do quite a bit of stuff, you know, just without the camera set up. I guess the biggest part with that is that whether or not I have time to actually edit it into a video or not is kind of my thought process on that, which might be the wrong thought process. Maybe I should just film everything. But I've got a little bit of hair algae. We're gonna grab that, and my clock is going off, my timer. So that's actually gonna be it for the video for today, basically, other than some cleaning here and a little bit. This corner has a tendency to get some of that long stringy hair algae because I have another little dead space right back here. One of the crypts that I've never done a feature video is hiding in the back here. I can't wait. I honestly can't wait to do that video, and I really want to. And I should, and I think I'm going to. So stay tuned for this crazy crypt back here. It's really cool. It's one of the metallics. But yeah, that's kind of it for today. Do the subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment if you have a question. Post a question down below, and I'm gonna talk to y'all later. Bye-bye now.